Finally. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was finishing up a call right before you, and then I went to click on your link, and it gave me a 404, and I thought, uh-oh, this is not good. So,
Yeah.
hey, how you doing? Is this your son?
Oh, yes, and he loves when I'm like talking to people because he loves to come in and just say hi and then he goes back out like,
Well, you got to
okay.
say hi to me. So, my name is Peter. What's your name?
Remington.
What did he say?
Remington.
Remington. Well, nice to meet you, Remington.
Nice to meet you.
And how old are you?
6.
6.
6. Wow, you're a big 6-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. He is.
I thought
Give
he
him a
was
little.
like 10 or something.
Oh, no, no, no. He is, yeah. He was actually at the doctor's like a month ago for his school checkup before school. And they
Yeah.
were like, he's grown like 4 inches since we saw him last. So I was like, oh boy.
Are you
Yikes.
tall? Are you pretty tall?
No, I mean I'm 5'6", so
Okay.
no, yeah. But his brother is very tall, so
Okay.
I think that's the dad thing. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, yeah.
Well,
So, I want to just say thank you so much for coming on and taking your time to speak with me. I know it was very hectic there for a minute, and I apologize,
oh,
but
that's okay.
thank you so
It's no big
much
deal. Yeah.
for your patience and just working with me through that. Yeah, that was a little odd, but I got it taken care
Good.
of. So, I just want to tell you a little bit about me, because I don't know what you do know of me. Do you
Okay.
know? I don't want to
Well,
just.
I looked at your profile a little bit, but I'd love to hear from you, not your profile. So that'd be good.
Okay. Um, so I was a single mom for 17 years. And I worked in law enforcement for 12 years.
Okay.
Um, and then I moved and I got injured on my job, per se. Uh, and so I've not been
As
able to,
a police officer, you got injured on your job?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so now, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I supposed to do now? Because it doesn't look like I'll be able to go back to law enforcement, right? So everything that I've worked for is like, now what? um, so I knew that there was a need for change in the mental health field, like traumatically huge. Um, there, the suicide rate in our younger generation is crazy.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I got my certificate to be a life coach. And then I was like, how do I start my business? What do I do now? And I was never on social media. Like that just wasn't my thing, right? Like I am a private person, but like before I was very just like private, one of those things. And so my kids had TikTok. And I was like, well, I don't really mess with it. I have TikTok because my kids have it, right? So, you know what? I think I'm just gonna just jump out there and start posting about my journey, right? Because I know that when I was going through my stuff, I had a hard time opening up to people. I had a hard time, just like trusting, connecting, and all that stuff. So I did, and when I posted my first story, it just went crazy. And I had such an amazing feedback. And I mean, like, it's just been nonstop, like a big ball. It just kept
That's
going and going. And so I realized with all the messages that I was getting and the people that were talking, that there was also a need for a platform for people to go share their story, not only to share it to be inspirational for someone who may be going through the same thing, to give them that light, but also to help them heal, right? And also trying to change the stigma on mental health and make it more of okay to talk about, or okay, that someone does have PTSD. I mean, not that it's okay, but we don't have to treat them differently, or make it
right.
like they can't do something. And so that's where Empowering You came from.
Oh,
And so that's a little bit about me and why I am doing what I'm doing. I did a book, an anthology, which went on to be a bestseller. I've had 3 different magazines, maybe 4. I don't off the top of my head, that I've been featured in for my work.
Wow.
And so I am now just not only bringing on individuals for healing and all that, it's all for those who are under a lot of stress or anxiety, which I feel like that is something you've probably dealt with a lot of, if not more, giving everything that you do. Because I feel like, I mean, with one of my courses, that's something that people need to also learn to try to judge, or not judge, but handle and juggle and all that. And some people don't know how to do that, right? So yeah, that's where you came in. You seem to be doing amazing things, a lot going on. And apparently you thrive well under pressure and with stress. And I'm sure you have all that stuff going on. And so I think that, even probably a lot of your business could probably help some of my viewers. So that's also amazing. So that's why I wanted to bring you on and talk with you and, see what led you on your journey and why you do what you do.
Okay. Where do you want me to begin? I can tell you a little bit about my background as it relates to, it's funny you bring things up like that because the world, whether it's your business life or personal life, is full of pivots, right?
Yeah.
You had to pivot so many times, right? And it's how you kind of in the framework of that, how you think about the pivot. So just going back a little bit in the history of me, I have always been in product development and innovation, and I worked my way up and ran divisions for little companies, Nike, Hewlett Packard, Verifone, managed from 13 to 1,000 people in divisions. Traveled pretty much anywhere in the world. And one of the things what's interesting, Latasha, is this. I've been to all over Europe. I've been to the Middle East. I've been all over Asia. I've been all over South America. The only continent I haven't been to is Africa. But what's interesting is you can sit in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. You can sit in the UK, Scotland. You can sit in China, Singapore, Malaysia. And when you start looking at universal principles, when you think about, love, kindness, fairness, generosity, empathy, compassion, family, it's all the same. They may have a different culture. Like in Abu Dhabi, the way they express their culture and even how women and men interact and how women are treated, I don't agree with that. But the commonality is there. The underpinnings universal law. I learned this as a young man. And so, and if I'm not trying to get religious here or anything, but
No. It's good. Go ahead.
if you, I'm not a super scholar, but if you've read parts of the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, all of these things, the message is kind of common.
Yeah.
You can cite different verses and things like that, but it's this common message of the human condition. What does it mean to be human? And so, from that, I've got a lot of life experiences, good ones, not so good ones. But through it all, it's been an interesting ride. And I don't, do you know who Stephen Covey is? Have you ever heard of him at all? So Stephen Covey, he was part of Covey Franklin. He passed away, but Stephen Covey wrote a really cool book. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's actually a field guide for life. And if you haven't read it, you should, because number one, it will blow your mind. Number two, a lot of the things that he teaches in there are lifelong frameworks for not just in business, but for your kids, for you, for all of us, right? So he talks about, the different habits, like begin with the end in mind. Put first things first. He talks, these are the different habits. Think, win. There's a myriad of them, there 7 of them that are there. The reason why I bring up Stephen Covey is because he was this big, tall man, and he had a bald head, very striking. And back when I was an engineering manager, he came when he just had written this book, was starting, he was going on the speaking tour. He came to our I worked at Fluke Electronics, and he came to our executive management week, and he talked, and it was a great speech. And it was that afternoon. We were at this place called Semiahmoo up in Washington State, and I saw him sitting out there by himself, and he's in his suit and everything, and he was sitting there with a lemonade. So I came up to him. I said, "Hey, Stephen, I really love to talk, and do you mind if I sit down with you, just chat?" He goes, "Sure." So I went, got a lemonade, came out, and all the other people were drinking and partying and stuff, and I thought, well, this is great. I get to talk to this guy. And so I sat there with him. We talked about life, and we talked about all of the commonalities in life, and then really the fundamental laws of choice. And what's interesting, he goes, Peter, he said, what's funny, and I think probably at that time he was probably in his maybe late 40s, early 50s. He's passed away since, but he said, what's interesting about choice in life, he goes, I try to keep things simple so I keep it in my head, which I subscribe to too, right? But he said, choice is like a stick. Now, I'm saying this because you and me and everyone else who's, listening to this, we've all had defining moments in our lives. You had a defining moment when you got injured, which pivoted you to where you are now, right? So this was a defining moment. And he said, choice is like a stick. When you pick up one end, you pick up the other. And I sat there and I thought about it. He goes, think about it, right? Good choice, good consequence. Bad choice, bad consequence. And really, if you think about that, he talked about fundamental universal laws. The consequence is built in with the choice. When you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. And we've all made great choices in our life, and we've all made very bad choices in our life that have caused bad things to happen. But it's a universal law, right? So, but it does teach the sense of, responsibility in what you're doing. And, going back to, well, let me tell you, if it's okay, I'll tell you another story. Do you want to?
Oh my gosh, please. No, go ahead. I love this. Thank you.
So I'll tell you another story. So my brother-in-law, his name was Doug Crichton. Doug Crichton is the brother of Michael Crichton, who did all the Jurassic Park and all the books and stuff like that. My sister was married to his brother. And Doug Crichton.
What? That's very fun. I said
I'm telling you the story for a reason. So I'm not saying, they did great stuff. Doug actually worked behind the scenes, and he edited a lot of the screenplays and all the stuff that Michael did. Michael was kind of the front man. They were both really tall guys, but I knew Michael and I knew Doug, and obviously they both had passed away. Doug was the longest survivor of bone marrow cancer ever. In fact, they did a medical journal on him because he survived for so long, and my sister Debbie took care of him. But the reason why I'm telling you this story is part of this whole journey and pivots, and then dealing some of the stuff like you talk about, like how do you deal with stress and how do you deal with anxiety and all this kind of stuff. And I think, and look, to be honest with you, I have a son, and it's genetic. It's not situational. He has bad anxiety and depression, and we work all the time. And he does therapy, he does everything. So look, I can relate because I'm living through. I don't have it, but as a father, I'm living through this with him, right? But going back to my story about Doug is Michael had this big, huge compound in Hawaii, on Kauai, on Hanalei Bay, which if you've ever been to Kauai, is a beautiful setting there. And so we were out there. It was my sister Debbie's birthday, and we had all the family there. And I came by myself because at that time my marriage was starting to fall apart, and I didn't realize it. But something inside me is like, something's not right, right? But anyway, so we had the birthday party, and Doug was a character, man. We sat outside on one of these picnic benches, and as it got later, more and more people said, "Hey, I'm getting tired. I'm going to bed." And so it just ended up being me and Doug, and we were sitting there under the stars in Hawaii. And me being a curious person, which we all are, I said, "Hey, Doug," I said, "what's it like to have cancer?" Because I said I've never really been able to ask someone that question. And now this guy was a chain smoker. He smoked all the time. He had a cigarette in his mouth. And he goes, "Well, Peter," he goes, "I gave it to myself." And I went, what? You gave cancer to yourself? He goes, yeah. He goes, and here's what happened. And he told me the story about how he had bottled up anger and he did not know how to let it go. And he firmly believed that that anger turned into cancer, and that's what ended his life. And but we had this long talk, and we talked till like, I don't know, 5 or 5:30 because the sun was starting to come up. But you know what? There's 7 key questions, and he gave me these, and then he also introduced me to the Yogananda, which is a really cool book by the Yogananda. You can look it up; it's on Amazon. But he said, one thing I've learned, and I'll give you 3 of the keys. He said the first key that I learned working with, because he worked with a lot of yogis and masters in the world, because he had the money and he was able to to do that kind of thing. But he said the first question you always have to ask yourself is, what if everything I thought to be true were not? Now what would I do? Now if you think about that, it challenges your entire belief system, right? And your frameworks. This relates to what I'm doing in my company because it goes to the second key question of the 7 keys. The second one is, okay, so if that's the case and I'm challenging my beliefs, what else is possible? Right? Because if you're always looking at and saying, okay, I keep my blinders on and I follow the framework of others, I will always be in the status quo and it will never have an impactful and meaningful life. So if we're asking ourselves what else is possible and also teaching this to our children, there's always room for learning and changing. That's why I say, I just wrote a post the other day on LinkedIn. I said, I don't ever want to be an expert, and you shouldn't either. The reason why is, if you follow an expert, that's like driving your car looking in the rearview mirror. You're going to crash. Experts, you should follow guides, because experts deal with past frameworks. Well, things are changing. So a guide deals with past experiences and frameworks, but always asks what else is possible and then implements new things, right? So that's the first 2 keys. The third key was, he told me, he said, and this relates to the stress and anxiety you're talking about, right? Because I've had bad situational anxiety. I can tell you a story about the time. There is no one that's truly successful that hasn't hit rock bottom. My rock bottom at one time, and I can tell you the story if you want to hear it. There was a time I had $25 in my bank account to my name. That was it. So, but I'll get back to that story in a second. What Doug taught me, he said these first 2 questions, and he said the third one that you got to discover is just let go. Because you can't continue to claw at belief systems and frameworks and things that you think matter that in the end really don't. And if you have that kind of an attitude of, how can I always be a student? And in my company, one of our isms is, everybody's a teacher, everybody's a student. You don't have failure. You win or you learn, right? I define, I say, look, guys, if you want to talk about failure and you want me to define failure, failure is when you quit when you still have passion in something. And when you do that, that leads to regret. And you never want to die with regret, because my father died of regret. I got to see all that happen before he passed away. And it is a horrible thing. It's probably worse than cancer, worse than any kind of disease.
Did he talk to you about that? Is that how you knew there was regret?
Oh, yeah. I took care of him for the last 2 years of his life, and I laid there almost every night on the couch. And he woke me up 2 or 3 in the morning. And just, my dad was an old, he was a full-blooded Ukrainian, old Eastern European guy. And just seeing him cry and talk about all these regrets he had, the things he should have done in his life and the way he should have treated us kids and all this kind of stuff. It was like, man, so Latasha, you think about it, right? We all have parents, right? And you look at things and you say, okay, these are my parents. There's some things I love what they taught me. I'm going to do it. But then there's these other things like, I am never going to do that with my kids, right? You could relate to that.
Right? Yeah.
And we all do, because parents are humans. We put our parents up on a pedestal when we were kids, but they're human beings just like all of us as we turn adults. And then we realize, oh, shoot, these guys are, yeah, they're my parents, but they're human beings and they made a lot of mistakes. It's like I'm making a lot of mistakes, right?
Right, because everyone's trying to figure it out. We're all learning. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a thing I learned, from my dad, is don't ever die with regrets. But going back to what I was saying is, the just let go, it is so hard to do that when you are so ingrained. And I mean, if you look at our country right now, this is a classic example, the divisiveness we have in this country of, first of all, not asking question one, not asking question two, and not letting go. And this is what happens. We are violating these fundamental universal principles right and left in the United States of America. This is why we have all these problems. So, I mean, I don't care whatever your belief system is politically, it does not matter. The only thing that matters is the universal laws and truth that run the world. Whether you are in Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, or the United States of America, it is all the same. And that's what I learned as a young man. So with all of this stuff and knowing that, okay, I can follow those things, I can let go, I can pivot, and that gets back to my story about the $25. So there was a time in my life, so several years ago, and I had to look. People who are successful in business, I have not met. There are maybe at the fringe, very small percentage where nothing ever went wrong, but that's not true for 99.99. I can tell you if you haven't been an experienced person unless you have failed miserably. And I have failed miserably. And so at that failure point in my life, I had nothing to my name. Now, there were reasons why, and I was trying to help some people and things like that. But I was telling you about my son. He was living north of me about an hour. And I went into a gas station and I had $25 to my name. And my son was really struggling mentally. And it was like, okay, I remember getting out of the truck and putting my hands on the truck bed and thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to get gas or am I going to eat today? And you probably know what I chose. I didn't eat. But the thing that's funny is while I was pumping that $20, because I couldn't go to 25. When I was pumping that gas into my truck, what I realized was this, and we'll talk, if you want, we'll talk about awareness, understanding, and realization, because there's some things there.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and how all this stuff connects and plays out if you want to do that too. But the thing is, what I realized, and this is a common thing, guys, I am nothing special. I put my pants on just like all you guys. Yeah, am I successful now? Sure. There was a time when I was not. And, the one thing I realized standing there in my truck thinking, okay, I'm going to be hungry today. But one thing is I have my smarts, I have my ambition, and I have my persistence. And no one can take that away from me. That's kind of like when looking at what happened to Nelson Mandela, being in prison for 27 years, talking about, I control my mind. No matter what condition and environment I am in control of me and my mind. It's no different than Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps. One of the best quotes, and I live by this. Viktor Frankl said, there is a space between stimulus and response. In that space is the power to choose. And in that power to choose is your growth and freedom. And you can look that quote up. That is one that he wrote, the book. He was a concentration camp survivor. He lost his wife. He lost his kids. He survived. And that was the book that you can get it up on Amazon. Incredible story.
Is that what the book is called?
Look up Viktor Frankl. I was trying to think of the name of the book. It'll come to me here in a sec. But if you look up Viktor Frankl, it's Frankl, Frankl. Very famous individual. Just like, as you know, Nelson Mandela, very famous individual too. People, these are people that transcend, right? They transcend the world in the trappings and the mental limitations that we impose upon ourselves through our ego. And somehow some of these people, they figured out, well, so this leads me to, I don't know, do you want me to keep going on this stuff?
No, no, please. I actually am really enjoying this, and I'm learning stuff myself, and I'm taking down a whole bunch of notes over here.
Okay, all right.
So
Well,
no,
I'll keep going. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, well, the thing about it, I look at is, in business and in life, I think it's most important. How can you make impact on others, and how can you create movements, right? And an impact can be as simple as, hey, I just smile at a stranger. And impact can be much more,
I
than that.
literally just said that. I made a post about that, and that's what I said. You never know what
Doesn't have
just
you
a
don't
smile
know
can
how you're
do.
going to change a person, but if you look through the lens of impact, not look through the lens of belief system, you are taking away all of these stratifications and barriers and everything that it gets in the way of people being with people, humans being with humans, right? And so going back to my story, so I got my mother. She gave me one year for Christmas some tapes, and the guy's name was Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you've ever heard of Joseph Campbell or not, but Joseph Campbell's another guy you should. So these tapes are called The Power of Myth. Now, back then it was a VHS tape. It was a long time, so I've got to date myself. But you can get them; they're in the cloud, whatever. The Power of Myth. Joseph Campbell spent his whole life really looking at all of the different mythologies of all the cultures, all the way going back to Greek and Roman mythology and all through. And there's lots of commonalities in these stories, right? Because the commonality is the human condition, right? But Joseph Campbell, he was a scholar and just a brilliant man, but he's probably most well known for the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is, I'll explain it. Have you ever seen a Star Wars movie?
Glimpses, but I've not sat down
Okay,
and watched
that's
it.
okay. Well, what's his name? George Lucas. So George Lucas actually knew Joseph Campbell, and George Lucas, when Joseph Campbell got a Lifetime Award, I think it was about 4 years before he passed away. George Lucas came in front of everybody and said, if it wasn't for Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, you would have not ever seen a Star Wars in the franchise it is today. By the way, the hero's journey has been used in Monsters, Toy Story, Casablanca. All these blockbuster movies have used the hero's journey. And basically, it's a circle. And you start out here at what's called the ordinary life, right? So I always talk about, let's just talk about Luke Skywalker, because a lot of people know that. And I've talked about this hero's journey in terms of Star Wars because it makes sense. So Luke Skywalker's right. He's up on Tatooine and he's doing his thing and collecting robot parts and running around in his speeder and stuff like that, right? And he goes into this one area and there's the sand people there. And they attack him and they're about ready to kill him. And then so you're doing your ordinary life. And then all of a sudden there is a mentor that comes with the calling. Okay? So this is some event, just like you. You had, by your injury, being a police officer, I don't know if you had a person that was a calling, but it could be an event, which totally changes your life. Well, for Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up and he saves him from getting killed by the Sand People, but he tells him, Luke, there's a disturbance in the Force and you need to go. So most people, they're what's called a reluctant hero. They go, nah, I can't do that. He said, I can't do that. I got my aunt and uncle here. We garden. They need me. I've got chores and responsibilities. This is what typically people do when they get a calling to something new. They become the reluctant hero. They resist because they have to break free from their common, ordinary life. And basically, it's ego and fear that's holding them back, right? So what happens to Luke Skywalker? He takes off. Obi-Wan Kenobi came as like a hologram. He disappears. He goes back, and as he's coming over the horizon, he sees a bunch of smoke. Well, he goes in where his town is, and the dark side, which is Vader and the stormtroopers, came and they burned his town up and killed everybody, including his aunt and uncle. So this is called the crossing. Okay, So there is something that happens in your life that forces you to cross to the next part of your hero's journey, whether you like it or not. So he's so enraged, he goes, "That's it, I'm leaving." Now, when you do that, you typically will come into somebody that's a mentor. For him, he went up to whatever that planet was, and remember Yoda was up there, the little guy, and he landed his ship. And then Yoda taught him to be a Jedi master and shoot balls in the air and raise his ship and all this kind of stuff, right? But that was his mentor. I don't know. You probably there was something, whether there was a person, people, somebody after your injury kind of got you to start thinking about, hey, you could pivot, you could do this, right? Which is where you got today. But it doesn't end there. So now he goes through there. Now he knows he has to fight Darth Vader, because Darth Vader is the arch enemy. He's the evil. He's the villain. He's the bad guy. And then you got the Emperor behind him, right? You always have somebody that's the agitator. And so he goes through, and the next phase in the circle in the hero's journey is you go into the dark cave, which is basically you are confronting your own fears, your own weaknesses, your own shortcomings. So in the dark cave, he has to fight Darth Vader. And in that fight, they're fighting, right? And the Emperor's over there, kill him, right? Because Darth Vader falls, and he's about ready to slay this, and Darth Vader pulls his helmet up and says, "Luke, I am your father." Which basically the metaphor there is, I am you, you are me, I am your ego, right? So now he has to slay his own fear and ego while this agitator is going, kill him, right? So what happens is he lifts him up and saves Darth Vader, and that is the saving of the soul, okay? So what happens is, this is, in a sense, you go from awareness all the way through training, and now you're at understanding in this circle. He leaves the cave, you become an elevated individual, and you come into where you come back into community, and you teach to raise awareness of others. That is realization. If you look at the definition of wisdom, wisdom is nothing more. Awareness, understanding, realization, expansion of awareness is wisdom. If you look at Lincoln, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Nelson Mandela, all these people in the world, they just had expanded awareness. And this is what, they're elevated individuals, but it was because of and by the way, you can be going through a single or multiple hero's journeys at a time in your life. And this is all of the awareness, understanding, realizations, the pivots, everything you're doing, right? And I often think that if you are not having upheaval in your life, you are not learning at a great enough rate. So, go ahead.
Everything that you have said right now, like just with that story of the circle, like resonates like deep within me, because when I was younger, I don't think I shared this with you, but whenever I was younger, as a child, I was molested. And then when I got to be, I think it was 26, 27, I was raped. But I can remember in those moments, right? I would always be like, okay, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Like, now what? Like, why is this happening? I'm a big believer in God. And so there were times where I questioned, like why or what, like not understanding what was happening or why it happened. Right.
Yeah.
But then I had my kids, and it was when I had my kids and, getting them ready to go to like school or to go out without me, you know what I mean? Is when I like had like a moment of like, okay, I know what can happen, right? Like we all know what can happen, right? But when you actually are going through it and you experience it, you'll look at it a lot different. And so you pay more attention to red flags. You pay more attention to things that maybe people who haven't went through it wouldn't pay attention to, right? And so as I'm, preparing them to go off into the world on their own, I can remember I would always, always, always remind them of no touch, no touch. You know what I mean? Like I just like, would always enforce that. And I always like limited who was around them. I limited where they went, and I made sure that my daughter could take care of herself, like in self-defense classes, and my son could take care of himself. Like, so all of that. And so, when I had the accident, um, it pushed me even more to want to do this because of my experience and how I felt and how nobody was, like talking to therapists didn't work because they didn't understand. Right. And then you feel alone and like no one's going to understand anyways, and people are going to judge you. And I've had that happen to me. And so hearing you say about, you're going to be at the crossroad and you're going to be here. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that's my life right now. Like I hear
Well,
that.
yeah. Does it start making sense to you? See, this is the thing again, Joseph Campbell with the hero's journey. There's so many, in fact, Hollywood uses the hero's journey as the framework to make scripts for movies because this is the life condition. One thing I've taught my sons is the way, everybody has their own frameworks. You were just talking about a framework of how you looked at something that was really bad in your life, and you've now created this framework to transform that, something awful into something better. I've always taught my boys, I say, look, here's the thing. I'm not necessarily fatalistic, but life is like a puzzle. And, you have all these pieces, right? And you can't really see the picture of the puzzle because you haven't put it together. But you start putting these pieces down and they're random, and you don't know why, but you just keep putting these puzzle pieces down. And pretty soon a pond appears. It's like, oh, that's a pond. I recognize that. You keep laying pieces down, and pretty soon there's a boat in the pond. And you keep laying pieces down, and now there's a tree next to the boat in the pond. And if you look at a puzzle like life, if you can think about things that have happened to you in the past, you don't understand why it's happened. But when you can go and transform or transport yourself into the future and look back, you go, I understand now why that is, right? And it makes so much sense. And I always say, look, I am massively against rape or anything like that. It's not cool. But the thing is, I will say this. In some sense, while the act of that is horrific, I look at things like in our life, I don't believe there's nothing done to us. There's everything done for us. And if you look at that and say, if I can have a healthy outlook, even from a horrendous, violent thing like that, what can I get out of that? I can't go back and change the past, but what I can do is I can, like you talked, I can expand my awareness to be able to help others, my kids, other people that maybe have gone through this behind me that I can help, right?
Yes. Everything that I love that. And that is, I would not change anything that has happened to me in my life. I believe everything does happen for a reason, and it is just how you approach it, and some people just need that help to get to that mindset, right? Some people just need that help or that light or that guidance of like, oh, so someone does understand how this feels, or someone else has been through this and look at where they are now. You know what I mean? Because so many people are, again, like afraid to speak up, afraid of what the consequences will be if other people know, right? Or if I take this person, yeah, or that's my friend, and you're lying about my friend. You know what I mean? So they don't want to take sides, and so people just keep things to themselves, and then that's not healthy for them.
Yeah.
And it just they don't grow. They just stay in that spot, and it holds them, and people just need help to get out of that spot.
It's and I can't totally understand it because I haven't been through it. I can empathize with it, and I will say this: a lot of times, based on shame, they feel shame for what happened when it wasn't even their fault.
Mm-hmm.
But I always go back to the 7 keys, and I'm giving you the first 3. If you can say, okay, what else is possible? How can I look at this different to make a positive impact for others, right? even though this bad thing happened to me, what can I do, right, to change that? You know, of the famous poet Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau said one time, most men live lives of quiet desperation. And really what that means is the desperation is in the blinders and never asking yourself, what can I do in my life to pivot to make a bigger impact? I look at it this way, right? You probably know people like this. I do too. They have a job. They go to work. They work their job. They typically don't like it. They come home. They drink a couple beers. They sit on the couch. They watch TV. They go to bed. They wake up and they do it all over again.
It's a repeat. Yeah.
That is a life of quiet desperation. And I tell you, that is a life of regret. And that is something for me personally, and I hope everybody, if this, people are going to listen to this thing, that everybody, if that doesn't get you to think about, I don't want to be that person, I don't want to live a life of quiet desperation, then do something about it.
Yes, I truly have loved everything that you have shared, all the stories, all the good questions to ask yourself, the books to read. Like, you have been very informational, especially for me. So I appreciate it. Is there, getting a mentor is important. I believe that. And so you have one, or did you have one to help you when you were, $25? And I'm guessing that's where your crossroad was, right?
Well, that was that was one of the Death Cave experiences I had. I've had many. Okay. Well, here's the thing I will say about mentors and also experts. I look at things as not any one individual that can be a mentor. I look at a community of people that can be a mentor. Some people say you are the sum of the 5 closest people around you in your life. I think there is some truth to that. If you want to raise your energy, raise your status, raise your wealth or whatever, then change those 5 people, right? So, and there are things to be said for, there are people that have come before you that have experiences that can help you through going through what you need to go through, and maybe even accelerate it. Okay. But as you know, right, the therapist is not going to fix you.
No.
Only you are going to fix you.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
At the end of the day, whoever that's why I say don't be an expert, be a guide. And I also say, if you're going to look for mentorship, look for a community. There's a lot of great communities out there that you can participate in that have experts in different areas, right? Because look, I have my life, I have my experiences. I think there's a lot of them. I have a lot of experience, but the thing is, I'm only me. So if you come to me for mentorship, all you're going to get is me. If you come to,
I think you would be a good mentor. I mean, you just have a lot of good advice.
Me, I don't know. I don't look at myself that way. But the point I'm making, Latasha, is if you look at a community, you're looking at a group of mentors with a collective experience that you can draw from, not any one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, but you got to go in it with saying, first of all, that question 1, what if everything I thought to be true were not? Now what do I do? Number 2, what else is possible? And number 3, just let go. Because you still have to go through the hero's journey. Yes, they can help accelerate it, but you still got to go through that on your own. As we always have said, oh, there's your other son. Or is that the same?
It's the same one. He
has a shirt on now. Okay.
Yeah. He came back because he wants to go outside. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, have fun outside. I'm glad you want to go outside and play outside.
Yeah. Sorry. He's
the kids are so great. I love kids. They're a lot.
I don't know about your kids, but I know my kids saved me.
Yeah, well, they're great teachers,
Oh yeah.
man, can you learn a lot of stuff from kids, and be reminded of stuff that you should have learned or you did learn but you forgot, right? As an adult.
Yep. Yep. That is so true. So true. Um, so other than the great stuff that you have already given us, do you like have any, I don't want to say advice because you've given a lot of advice, but like, you know, ways where if people are struggling or if people need, you know, some help, where you think they should go or where, you know, a good source for them might be?
Well, there's interesting ways to answer that, Latasha, because
Other than me, not me, because
yeah,
everybody already knows me now. I'm just kidding.
no, there's interesting ways to answer that because you can say, okay, help is it an external focus or an internal focus? So I'm not saying external focus. There are some people that can certainly help, and I do believe therapists are great. I think everybody should go to a therapist because you get new tools in your toolbox. Nothing wrong
Mhm.
with that. And men should be going just as equally as women. There is no stigma about that, and if there is, get over yourself. So, but at the same time, um, I think if you can, here's the thing: the brain. Look, I have 20 plus years in neuroscience research and brain science. I've done work with neuroscience for fMRI and EEG studies. I know exactly how people buy in the reward circuit. I know about the addictive center, the nucleus accumbens. That could be a whole nother discussion we have if you
I
ever
mean, I
want.
need to bring you back on. Like, okay, let's talk about this today. Okay.
Well, but it's fast. Look, here's the thing. I think for me, and I think for everyone out, everyone listening is, always be curious, right? Curiosity, maybe it killed the cat, but curiosity is going to expand your life. And so I'm just always curious about things. It's like, when I met these guys, and there's a whole story to that, it was like, okay, that's really cool. But how do people buy? Because they said people don't buy based on benefits and emotions. We have fMRI studies to show it. We've done all kinds of research. And these guys are scientists, right? And they were looking at all the data. I'm going, okay, what's the application of that, right? And I did use it, and I built a system. And I have a course online that I've had for years that I've sold like 10,000 copies. And it talks about all this stuff. I went out and actually developed it in the trenches, built a company up that I had at the time from about 1.2 million to 6.6 million using this system. And there's a whole bunch of funny stories about that. So we can talk about that some other time. But going back to your question is, I think if you can, look, I understand the difficulty of going internal when you don't have the tools to do that. I was talking about my son. It is really, really hard. But I do believe that even in the most desperate of situations, the most depressed of situations, the most anxiety filled situations, you can still start to do that a little at a time while you're getting external help. Because I will say this to Latasha, the only lasting effect you will ever have on your life is internal, not external.
That was deep. Yeah, that was nice. That was
Well,
good.
think about what you've had to go through. And where did most of that come from? It was an internal processing, not external. That's what made it lasting. Look, that's the definition of a habit.
Yeah.
We don't get
Well,
habits from external people. We get habits from inside ourselves. And some
right. And
habits are
so,
good. Some habits are bad. Bad habit, smoking, that's a bad habit. We did it to
right.
ourselves. We made that choice. And the stick, there's a consequence out on the other end.
Yeah, that is
Good
so
habits,
true.
right? Like what you're doing, building your business, and you hit upon a chord that you made the choice to do it. Look at the consequence. It's good. It's flowing.
It is. I
Everything's growing for you, right? That's
yeah,
the stick, the fundamental law of choice and consequence.
yeah, yeah, I'm amazed
And
for
you're
sure.
living it. So good
I
for you.
and I have to remind myself sometimes, all the time, like I did that. Talking to people, and I'm sure maybe you've experienced this too with things that you've done, like having people that I've talked to or like come on my show, and sometimes one of my questions are like, So what made you decide that you wanted to share? Like, what made you decide to take that step and like do that for you and maybe others? And, you know, when my first time hearing someone say, hearing you and your story, that was just like a feeling that I just don't know how to explain, because I've never felt like that. Like, it was just like, I did that. Like, I gave you that encouragement. Like, okay, I didn't think I had something like that in me, but
see, Latasha, what you're defining and explaining is impact. See, you have created impact in others that's gone beyond just the smile to the stranger. You are impacting a bunch of people positively in their lives, even this little guy right here. And, you know, so if we focus on impact and we focus on movements, that's really what we should be focusing on, instead of, I'm building a business, I'm making money, I'm going to become rich. It's like, okay, good for you. But it's kind of a hollow outcome. I mean, you know, if you get to the point, and a lot of people have, you get to the point where you have a lot of money, then you go, okay, so what? It's kind of like, think about it this way, right? You ever bought a brand new car?
yeah.
So you love the car. It's like, oh my God, this is great. And about a month or two later, you go, yeah, it's a car. Big deal.
Right.
The newness wear off. In fact, through all this brain research and science, the brain, the anticipation of something is actually stronger than the actual event of something. You ever planned a trip? The anticipation of going on the trip is actually more gratifying to you in the brain than actually being on the trip itself.
Yeah.
It's true for all of us. That's the human brain. That's how we work.
I definitely want to chat with you after we're done on the show.
Sure.
But is there any way that people can reach out to you, or that if they want? I know you have mentioned about an app, and I think I saw. I don't know if you're still like a radio, and you said you had books. Like, what is that?
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know. Is most of your audience on LinkedIn, or are they all over the place?
Oh gosh, I got them. Thankfully, I got them all over. I have TikTok, I have Facebook, I have LinkedIn, and then I have the satellite radio. So I got them all over.
Okay, all over the place. Well, you can find me if you just look Peter Lusowski on LinkedIn. I'm there. You can connect with me there. The other way, I guess, to get a hold of me is all they have to do is Google my name. I've got several pages of stuff on me up there, and there's different things they can find if they want to, you know, do it that way. But LinkedIn's probably because I'm not really do Facebook, so I'm not really up there, but I am on LinkedIn, and that's a good place to come find me there.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I look forward to speaking with all of you and our wonderful guests that we're going to have on next week. So until then, everyone be safe, and we'll chat soon.